I want to introduce a few things that Layer 4 does, the transport layer. First of all, it does what we call flow control. Now, we're going to talk about these things in more detail later on, what we mean by that, but simply this means that the receiver of the data is in charge of adjusting the amount of data that can be sent, and it feeds that information back to the sender to optimize the link. It also does error control. Now, we saw in Layer 2, the data link layer, that error control was possible there, but we said it really didn't do it. It relied on Layer 4. Well, when the TCP protocol is used, the receiver will now ask for retransmission of segments that are missing. So if at Layer 2 we lost some segments, Layer 4 will notice that and will ask for resending of that data. Now, when we're using the UDP protocol, we can't do that, but we'll talk about that more later on. We also do multiplexing at Layer 4, the transport layer. We do this through some port numbers, and these port numbers are just a number that we attach so that we know what application wants to receive this information. And by using different port numbers, then we could have multiple streams going through there at the same time along the same communication line and separate it out when it gets to the receiving end. It is responsible for end-to-end communication. Now, I've got to tell you, when I first learned this stuff, I didn't know what this meant. After all, weren't they all kind of end-to-end? You know, weren't all the protocols and all the layers sort of end-to-end communication? Well, I finally figured out later on, as I began to study more and more in this field, that when we say end-to-end, we're talking about from the beginning application to the end application. In other words, the final resting place that this data is going to go and the origin of the data itself. So we're talking about the applications when we say end to end. And Layer 4, the transport layer, controls that by, again, those port numbers, and we'll talk more about those port numbers later on. That's it for then the main functions that we'll talk about for the transport layer.